Hi, welcome to the Libertarian Alternative. My name is Mark Selzer, and the Libertarian Alternative is an educational television show brought to you by the Libertarian Party as a courtesy to your community. We're here at the Atlanta Marriott Marquis Hotel at the Libertarian Party's Presidential Nominating Convention with Mary Ruwart. Now, Mary, you're a research scientist?
That's right, by training, that's exactly what I am.
And what does a research scientist do?
Well, basically we try to invent cures for diseases, and we usually do it in a form that we can put in a pill so that people can just go to their drugstore, take it, and hopefully feel better.
So that's what you do for a living, but you also have this other interest in libertarian ideas?
Yes, that's correct.
And so what is the main thrust of that? You write books?
That's right. I'm primarily a writer, although I do go out and speak about them, and healing our world in an age of aggression is basically my latest book. It's actually a revision of a book that came out 10 years ago. It's been so popular, I decided to update it. And basically it's, as you can see, it's got the 9/11 scene, but we have it overshadowed by the dove of peace. And the point there is that there is a way out. There's a better way.
There's a way to heal.
There's a way to heal, exactly.
So, what is the basic thrust of the book? What is the philosophy that you're trying to put forth in this book?
Well, you know, Mark, what we do is we treat each other on a one-to-one basis very well. We don't steal from each other. We don't. If we were neighbors, I wouldn't come over and take your things out of your house. We know how to make peace as neighbors. And if I were to do any of those things, well, if I came over and I beat you up or I started stealing from me, you'd try to retaliate and steal from me. We'd have a Hatfield and McCoy situation. We'd be feuding eternally. And so we know one-to-one how to behave. But let's say that I go to your house and I say, well, would you contribute to my favorite charity? Of course, as a good neighbor, I honor your choice, but today that's not what we do. We go to the government and say, gee, I don't like Mark's choice. He won't contribute to my favorite charity, so I'm going to make sure that a tax is imposed on him so it forces him to do it. So when we interact with each other group to group, we forget. We forget our good manners and our good neighbor policy.
And most of the time when you do it that way, if I was to voluntarily contribute to a charity, some of that money would actually go for what I was told it was going to go for. But if the government takes that money from me, the chances it's going to get to the poor person or to the environmental cause aren't very good.
That's right. In fact, environmentally, the governments of all countries are the world's greatest polluters. And most people don't know that, actually, but the U.S. military, for example, puts out something like as much chemical waste each year as 2 to 3 top chemical companies. And then, of course, when it comes to charity, I know I rented to welfare tenants a lot, and about 2/3 of the welfare dollar actually goes to pay the social workers. So that's not a good deal either. And the way the welfare is distributed is actually counterproductive. It encourages young teenage women not to get that first job, not to even get their high school diploma, but start having babies at an early age. When they finally wake up and say, whoa, this isn't going to get me anywhere. Now they have 3 children to put in daycare. They have to start at minimum wage. They just can't do it. So they're caught. They're caught for a long time. I had teenage mothers come to me and say, well, I'm pregnant now. I'm going to have my baby in a few months, so I'll be able to give you a welfare check for my apartment. It was like a rite of passage. And it's very, very sad. Very sad. So
we're paying people to behave this way, and they do behave that way. Some of them do.
Some of them. I mean, there were a few that are the kind of people that you and I would want to help, you know, that were struggling out of the trap. But it's so hard. There's so much disincentive because as soon as you get off welfare, you lose your medical benefits and everything. It's a tough thing. It's easy to get sucked in.
Yeah, it sounds like a trap. You know, I guess a lot of people don't think about the fact when you want to help someone with a problem. I mean, we all can't sit around and just let someone who does have a baby, who doesn't have money, who doesn't have any way to help themselves, just be in the street and not have anywhere to live and not have food. But what do you do when the situation of providing for that unfortunate person causes more people to purposely put themselves into that unfortunate situation so they can be taken care of as well.
Well, it's not just that. You were talking about people on the street. When the situation gets so bad that they're out on the street and literally homeless, then the welfare people aren't there at all for them, because you have to have an address in order to get your welfare check. You see, it has to be sent somewhere. They won't give you a handout. So what you see is the people who are truly desperate, the homeless, they don't get help from the welfare agencies. They have to rely on private charity. And that would be okay, except that our regulations often prevent private charities from helping them. The one story I remember very well, because as a landlord I had to meet all these city codes, was that Mother Teresa's helpers, the missionaries of charity, the order she founded, actually were in New York trying to help the homeless. They bought abandoned buildings to try to fix them up. And they bought a pair of buildings and showed their building plans to the city inspectors. They approved them. But when the nuns started the renovation, they said, no, you have to have a new elevator in there too. It's an extra $100,000. The nuns didn't have that much money. They didn't want to spend money on an elevator. They had to abandon the project.
Wow.
The homeless in New York City were literally left out in the cold.
So the reason that people are homeless is because of government regulation, not the fact that government is doing too little, but the fact that government is doing too much.
That's true. There was a study done on what causes homelessness. And what was found is that the cities that have the highest zoning regulations, city inspectors, and other types of restrictions are the ones with the highest percentage of homelessness. And the reason is that the price of the houses go up, so of course rents go up. People can't afford them, they end up in the streets.
Yeah, it's all supply and demand. I remember in the area where I lived in Hollywood, there was a time when many new apartment buildings opened up. They just built, somehow they managed to get past the zoning laws and build a bunch of new apartment buildings in that neighborhood. And the rent went just way, way, way down. There were all of these signs out in front of the buildings that said, "Move in, please, first month rent free, no security deposit." And they were desperate to get people to move in there. And that's the reason why rents are high, because they won't let them build. And the taxes and regulations on building often double the price of building at all.
That's right. That's
and then
exactly right.
A lot of times you just can't even change the zoning laws. I mean, they make zoning laws that actually prevent building. And they make laws that keep you from vacating old dilapidated buildings and putting up new buildings that would be cheaper and easier to maintain than the older buildings that are falling apart, because you can never get somebody out of those apartments. And it's very, very difficult to do. So again, homelessness, high rent is caused by government intervention, and also then they always try to have a program to fix the problem that they cause. Rent control. Now, what about rent control?
Yes, that contributes also to the problem, because what happens is, as a landlady, I can tell you this: if you are forced to keep your rents low, of course you have a lot of applications. So who are you going to pick? Someone who's just barely going to be able to make it, or someone who's got a really terrific job? Well, of course you're going to take the best tenants you can, because then you're sure you'll get your rent. What that means is that people who are, really on the edge, they're poor, they're just barely making it, they can't get the low rent apartments. They all go to basically the middle and upper classes.
That's very true. We find surveys or studies done on rent-controlled apartments, and we find that those rent-controlled apartments have gone to rich people.
And that's why. Who would the landlord rather have in their place? They want a rich person, because then if they don't pay their rent or they destroy the place, they can go after them and collect.
So what inspires you to be involved in the libertarian movement?
Well, I think